Yves Powell covers Montreal Impact /CF Montreal. Yes, I called them the Impact. We're allowed to do that now, apparently, as Yves tells us. She covers them for the Ball is Round podcast, a great one-stop shop for coverage of Montreal soccer. She's followed the club for the better part of a decade. Always enjoy her tactical analysis. Yves, great to talk to you.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I really respect the work you do on Club and Country, and I always enjoy hearing, especially from US, when we talk Canada soccer, US soccer, Nashville, whatever it may be.
That's right. As somebody who married a Canadian, I have a lot of respect for what happens north of the border. And my French is terrible, but that's okay. We'll move beyond that. So you're telling us we can call Montreal the Impact again if we want to, and we want to, by the way.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting change. Obviously, I'm sure you're aware that Montreal changed to a new club president. She's a former player. And last year, there was a lot of erasure of the former identity. Like even in publications that were made, the old crest was taken out of the pictures, and it was really intense. But the owner himself, Joey Saputo, said, people, of course, similar to the Canadians get called the Habs all the time.
Yeah.
Just the same as that, people are going to kind of call it what they want. So the official name remains CF Montreal for sure. But the club is definitely looking at ways to kind of bring impact back into the identity of the club in some way, shape, or form.
Good. And surely that will have a positive impact on the local fan culture as well, getting back to that appreciation of that history. And the history is rich. The present tense is really good, though. Is Montreal now unbeaten, I believe, in 9 matches now in all competitions, right? And 8 in league play. What's been the secret sauce to such a strong start for a club that I think pretty much everyone overlooked at the beginning of the year?
Definitely continuity. Obviously, last year there was a lot of tumult, not only around the rebrand, but as well Thierry Henry, left at the kind of the last minute. Wilfred Nancy auditioned basically for his role and was granted the proper head coach job early on into the season. And there was a lot of player turnover as well last year. You had guys like Kamal Miller, who were brand new. Georgi Mihailovic was brand new. We had a lot of players coming in, particularly on the left side of the field, who were brand new, not only to Montreal, a lot of them are also new to the league, which of course involves a big adaptation period. So overall, continuity as well. It was one of the youngest teams in the league last year. Typically, the starting 11 would be among the youngest, but they've grown, they've matured. Those young players who maybe made some late mistakes in, the 90 plus minutes last year have learned from that, and they're not making those mistakes this year.
And of course, one of those fairly young players, Alistair Johnston, traded to Montreal for a hefty sum, upwards of $1 million, more than $1 million, I believe, in total allocation money. How's he doing? Are you guys taking good care of him up there? And how's he fit in? We see the assists, we saw the goal. So tactically, he seems like he's really gelling with the squad. How's that adjustment period been for him? And are you glad to have him?
Thrilled to have him. He is a wonderful, wonderful addition to this team. He's playing actually in a role not really like the role that he had with Nashville. So he's almost exclusively, with the exception of I think 2 matches in total, played as a right wing back in Wilfred Nancy's preferred formation of what it's often a 3-4-3. And I honestly wasn't 100% sure, because Wilfred Nancy demands that his wing back, be a lot more involved offensively in the attacking play. And I hadn't necessarily seen a whole lot of that from Alistair when he was with Nashville. And obviously with the Canadian team, he typically plays as a right center back. But he's really adapted. I mean, it took a few matches, of course it did. It's entirely normal that be the case, but he's adapted really well. Obviously, he has really good connections to a lot of the players who are already in the squad, like Sam Piet, Kamal Miller, Joel Waterman, James Pantemis, and like the whole litany of Canadians. So he already had a good in there. He did live in Montreal as well for a little bit, so he does have kind of some basic rusty French that he's working really hard on, bless him. No, it's been a fantastic signing. He really has, in my opinion, it's still early days, but he's worth every penny of gam tam that Montreal paid for him.
You mentioned that he's playing a little bit more of a right wing back role rather than a right center back or as a fullback as he mostly played for Nashville. A big part of what Nashville felt like they weren't getting from that position was a little bit more attack. Obviously, his first goal scored over the weekend, but what has he been able to add to his game to be able to fit in as a role that requires a little bit more going forward?
So one thing I think I would probably start by saying is that the way Montreal's playing this year, it's a similar starting formation to what they played last year, but there's a little bit more fluidity when they're in possession. So it kind of becomes more of a 4-3-3, which means that there is coverage behind him because the center backs will spread out a bit wider, which wasn't necessarily the case last year. It kind of felt like that was lacking. So he does have a lot more license and he doesn't necessarily have quite as much responsibility because the center backs have adapted a lot better. But he's actually improved on his crossing a lot. I didn't see a lot of crosses out of him with Nashville. I don't know if it was a big part of his game, but he's developed some really important crosses to promising spots where the striker actually is in the box, which is also sometimes half the battle for Montreal. So definitely that as well. We noticed this particularly in the match with Charlotte. Joaquin Torres is typically the starting player on kind of the right wing, kind of in the 3-4-2-1, if you will. And he and Alistair Johnston had a really, really good like interchange back and forth in between each other. It was really stuck out in this particular match versus Charlotte. So I think also developing that chemistry with the attacking players.
Speaking of those attacking players, Georgi Mihailovic has just been unbelievable. Getting service from guys like Alistair, but also creating and providing his own service. He's on most people's lists, I believe, for early MVP candidate. He was good last year, certainly. He's great this year. What has been the key to his brilliance?
One thing that Georgie has improved a lot on is he runs into the box now. He continues the run so that if a guy like Romel Kyoto, for example, is drifting out wide, as we saw in his goal this weekend, there's somebody in the box so that Kyoto doesn't feel obligated to finish at, like, you know, a 3-degree angle, which he can do, but he doesn't have to do that. There's somebody else. But a lot of Mihailovic's goals so far this season have been essentially tap-ins because he's finishing the run after he distributes a ball to a player who is going to perhaps cross it in or play the pass so that he runs off the shoulder, whatever it may be. So it's really seeing the attacking action through to the very end. That's his biggest improvement as well. I know he said himself that he had focused a lot on his finishing and making sure that a higher percentage of his shots hit the target. So I think a lot of just self-discipline as well.
Well, you mentioned Kyoto there. Obviously, a lot of MLS fans remember him. He's been a long time MLS player, but who are some of the other attacking pieces that have allowed Georgie to he's scored 6 goals, yes, but he also has 4 assists. He's been that creator as well as that finisher. Who has kind of been the complementary pieces that have helped him be the all-around player that he is?
So obviously Kai Kamara signed late in the offseason for Montreal, and he's somebody, I think practically every defender who's been in the league longer than, just the season knows who Kai Kamara is. And he's in the top 5 scoring in MLS all-time history for a reason. He knows where to be and how to put the ball in the net. So having a guy like him, if Kyoto's not on the field, occasionally they're together, but not often. Having a guy like him to make the defense a little bit more worried, as well with Joaquin Torres, who I mentioned earlier. He has a lot of offensive trickery, a lot of dribbles, a lot of fancy footwork. So he can definitely keep the defenders occupied. And Ismail Kone is kind of your free floating guy, playing a bit of an 8 role, but he definitely loves to get forward as well. And especially with his strong start to the season, I think a lot of players in the league have woken up and started focusing on him as well.
So many people have woken up to this Montreal team, and it's unfair. And I think Nashville can relate to this a little bit too, in that some of these markets that aren't your traditional standout MLS markets everybody always wants to talk about, your New Yorks, your LAs, your original teams, can get the short end of the stick just a little bit. Do you think people are finally waking up to Montreal? They're top of the East, a third of the way through the season. And if not, what's it going to take?
I feel like certainly the coaches around the league, when we hear coaches discuss Montreal prior to playing them or just after, they're often very complimentary of the tactics and the system that Nancy's put in place, and of course the players buying into it as well. The league certainly seems into Montreal. They're making not just the footnotes of the articles anymore. They're taking up space, and people are noticing and saying Montreal seems to have what it takes to be a contender this year. And this is really the first time I think I've ever heard people on the outside, sort of people who aren't located right here, referring to Montreal in a positive way and as vociferously as they are this year.
Well, you mentioned Nancy's kind of tactical tweaks that he's kind of implemented this year, as well as mentioning him just there in terms of what he's been able to develop. What has he been able to develop? What is different from, I guess, what was expected when Thierry Henry was the coach, and what has he brought that's allowed this team to reach these levels?
Mm-hmm. So one of the big things I think was getting the three center backs, because that was definitely the preferred formation, was getting the three center backs in place, figuring out who was best where, and then making sure that they were able to develop that chemistry together. So last year, Kamal Miller came in, and he fit the left center back position like a glove. Rudy Camacho, who re-signed late in the season, or late in the preseason, my apologies. He isn't a super mobile player, but he is very communicative and very general-like. A lot of people do now refer to him as that. So he can kind of direct traffic a bit. And then Montreal did start the season with Kiki Struna, who was on an incredibly high salary last year, and did not re-sign this year. But Joel Waterman of the Canadian Premier League has come in and kind of stolen that third right center back spot. He's not super mobile guy either, but they've balanced each other out really well, because Kamal Miller loves to maraud up forward from time to time. And then the left wing back position. The left wing back position has been problematic for Montreal, honestly, the entire time. It's in my opinion where Montreal is by far the weakest. Right now, Alistair Johnston is starting there, but with Wilfred Nancy being more willing to adjust the 3-4-3 so that it becomes more of a 4-3-3 when the team is in possession, Lapalainen's able to go forward and be the winger that he actually is, without as much defensive responsibility. A lot of the time when poor Lassie, when he makes a defensive block or whatever it may be, it's almost like he's caught by surprise that he's done it, and I'm like, oh, you poor thing. But he's trying his best out there. He does run up and down that wing. He logs typically some of the highest kilometers per game, so power to him. But definitely, I think the flexibility at the back when Montreal's in and out of possession has just been a godsend for this team.
For our listeners, those are like miles, but a little shorter.
Multiply it by divided by 1.6 and you'll get your miles.
Yeah, whenever I'm in Canada, I'm like, I got like 100 kilometers. That's a long way. No, that's like 8 miles. It's quick. So Nashville and Montreal typically this year have employed similar shapes, the 3-5-2, 3-4-3 look. If indeed both teams do go with identical shapes on Wednesday, is there a battle that you're watching that you think will be crucial to deciding this match?
Oh my gosh, there's so many battles. Obviously, I'm going to be watching what Alistair Johnston's up to. I assume he's going to be starting. We had a little bit of concern for him having a knock, but seems to be all right. I was going to say Hani Mukhtar, but versus Victor Wanyama, but he started on the bench. Is he okay?
He went almost 120 minutes in the U.S. Open Cup against Atlanta. So it was, we'll see if he starts Wednesday, but I mean, I would say safe chance he's probably back in after rotating out and getting 45 minutes of rest against Houston.
Yeah, I would love to see Victor Wanyama work really hard to shut him down. Because for me, Hani Mukhtar is one of the scariest players in the league, and I feel like not enough people talk about him. And then likewise as well, Dax McCarty versus Georgi Mihailovic. Of course, they played together at Chicago. Yeah. So I think that's always a really interesting battle in the center of the pitch. And oh gosh, who would be starting at striker, do you think, on Wednesday? Because there's practically anyone.
Yeah, typically been Supong. Again, we'll see what rotation does in a short, congested slate. But if you're putting money on somebody, usually Supong's your guy up there.
Oh yeah, yeah, because he loves to get his head on the ball, doesn't he?
Yes,
oh,
he does.
Gosh, yeah. Okay, then in that case, I'd say either Kamal Miller or Rudy Camacho, probably both of them really, versus CJ Supong. Yeah,
I like
gotta
Kamal
make sure.
a lot. Kamal's another one of those young guys who's really, really started to come into his own. And old buddies with Alistair. I think he mentioned that even when it was Nashville versus, I guess it was Montreal last year, or maybe it was Orlando 2 years ago, that Alistair was like, "Oh yeah, me and Kamal, we're gonna be trash talking all game long." We know each other. But now they don't trash talk. They're encouraging each other. I'm sure
they trash talk together instead of trash talking.
Right,
they tag team it. Oh gosh, poor teammates.
And that's as far as we want to go into talking about the Canadian national team also, where those two play together, because that's still a little bit bitter around here. But fortunately, everybody qualified, so everybody's happy. And my son's going to have two teams to support at the World Cup. It's awesome.
That's right. And watch out.
I guess we will ask you about that then. Enthusiasm for the game has to be at an all-time high in Canada. I know you're in a very strong nucleus of soccer culture in Montreal that was strong well before Canada was any good at international soccer. But are you seeing that groundswell of enthusiasm nationally and even in Montreal around the national team carry over into MLS as well?
Big time. The entire nation has woken up to Montreal. The entire nation has woken up to the Canadian national team, as well. Of course, the women's team had a strong summer, winning the Olympic gold medal. Right. So that was really kind of a good precursor to the performances of the men's national team over the fall in the final qualifying window, the octagon, if you will. And so many of the players on the team have stories that so many Canadians can relate to, whether they were born here, whether they chose Canada as their team because they moved to Canada. Some players have come as refugees, some have just naturally immigrated. And they're just a very charming bunch. They all have very, very humble stories, very interesting and unique backgrounds. John Herdman is like the super intense hype man, motivational coach, So absolutely, it feels like there's almost something for everybody in that team. Like you can find a player to whom you can relate and you share something in common with, which is so nice. It's so nice to see, and really thrilled. The games are now selling out within minutes, and they could not give tickets away previously. And I so desperately hope Montreal would get one, but unfortunately Montreal pulled out of World Cup 2026 bidding.
Well, come on down to Nashville and watch a game here.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Fingers crossed.
Don't even, your stadium is so beautiful. It's got to be a shoo-in. I think it has to be.
Well, last one from me, which is a lot of people around Major League Soccer talk about how important it is for the United States to get back to the World Cup after missing the 2018 edition. How has the rise of the Canadian national team helped Montreal or possibly, I guess, even, TFC or Vancouver, but mostly Montreal in terms of just building buzz around the sport that can then kind of be taken advantage of by the club?
So always helps when Italy doesn't make it in Montreal because we do
it's a very different situation there.
There is a really large Italian community here in Montreal, so that certainly helps. And then Carlo Ancelotti said he might be interested in coaching Canada someday, so you never know.
Wow.
Actually his wife is Canadian, but no, it's been a big boost for sure. Obviously, kind of the political identity, national identity, I guess, if you were in Quebec, is a little bit different from the rest of Canada because Quebec does kind of identify as a nation within Canada. For one of the ways you keep that short. But
it's been a long time since there's been an independence referendum. So
I know, but there's always talks. You never know. You never know. But it's been really cool to see, bars have had lots of watch parties. And then of course it's great for the team to say, for CF Montreal to say, look, you want to come see these guys who just, walloped the US. Come on over to Stade Saputo. Tickets are dirt cheap. And you can see Kamal Miller and Alistair Johnston and Sam Piet basically on a weekly basis if you want. No, there's been lots of jerseys. I've seen lots of Canadian jerseys around, even on people I don't necessarily associate as being soccer people, just general sports people. I've seen them in Canada soccer jerseys, which are so hard to get. So I'm like, how did you pull that off? I would say Montreal was able to host a Canadian women's celebration friendly after that. And I think if they were able to host a men's game, even just a friendly soon, I think it would definitely help bring a lot more people to Stade Saputo, both for the national team and then for the club as well.
Well, I'm hoping for that for you after following your journeys a couple times over, I believe, to Toronto, including for that clinching match. Hopefully they can come to you here one of these days. Thank you so much, Eve, for your time. How can people follow your work?
So my podcast, The Ball is Round, it can be found at TBIR Montreal, and I myself can be found at EveJulia9 on Twitter. We also have an Instagram under the same handle, and we typically record on Sundays. This week we're recording on Monday, but typically we record on Sundays, and we keep it live and interactive if ever you want to join and tell us what you think or feel, or if you disagree with anything I just said.
Awesome. A vulnerable place to put yourselves, but awesome and great way to continue the conversation about soccer in a growing soccer country. Eve, thank you so much for your time. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Take care.